All right, apush students. All right, so today we got our video on labor unions and strikes. All right, it does say review, but this is going to be just our notes for today. All right, instead of doing a separate activity on this. All right, now again with this, we're going to look at several labor unions and we're going to look at a couple strikes. All of these are in your textbooks. Definitely make sure that you are reading that extra detail about them. I'm only going to be giving you the highlights of these different topics. All right, so let's get the show on the road. Okay, so our first labor union is the Knights of Labor. Okay, so for each of these labor unions, we're going to have kind of like a little chart happening here. So we got goals, tactics, members, problems, and then the people that are in here are going to be your leaders. Okay, so for our Knights of Labor, they are not going to be around very long, okay? All right, so they're an early labor union group, all right? So their goals, most of these goals are going to be very similar to some of our other labor unions. You are going to see a lot of overlap, all right? But if we would make a list here, 8-hour workday, because before you're working 12 hours a day, if not more. They want to get rid of child labor, right? Because the idea of having children working means that you might not have someone else who's an actual adult that is working. Having a cooperative where it's like everybody is kind of working together for those same goals, all right? Equal pay for all of those different people that are working, all right? Not, not for certain, like say one ethnic groups, like say Irish get paid less than somebody else or something like that, all right? They want the government to own some of the things dealing with businesses. So the telegraph, telephone, and railroads, right? And they think that if the government owns those things, then they will be able to regulate them and make it so it's even for everyone, right? Kind of think of this as a fight back against those robber barons that we talked about, right? The idea that if you got Vanderbilt controlling all these railroads, then that might not be good for a business, right? And then that would affect the workers, right? And they also want a graduated income tax, all right? We currently have a graduated income tax in the United States, all right? If you make more money, you should pay more in taxes. If you make less money, you pay less in taxes. So it's more about a percentage of how much you're making, not a like flat rate. Okay, all right, so our tactics, all right, they're going to want to do strikes. Okay, strike, for a quick definition, is a stoppage of work until your needs or goals are met. All right, in particular, we're going to see them matched up with the Haymarket riot or the Haymarket strike, right? And we'll get to that one in a little while, right? Their leaders are Uriah Stevens and Terrence Powderly, right? These two lovely gentlemen up here. Right? The members of their union, all right, they're going to allow skilled and unskilled laborers in their union. So not everyone, we will get to a labor union that includes everyone, right? But people who are going to either have a skill, so think like a carpenter, a plumber would be your skilled laborers. Unskilled laborers would be like your immigrant that just got off of the boat from Ellis Island, all right, and they are working in a factory and you don't have to have any skills in order to work in that factory, right? The problems and the downfall of the Knights of Labor is they will be associated with anarchists with the Haymarket riot. All right, so again, we'll get to the Haymarket riot in a moment, all right, but anarchists are people who don't want any government involvement at all, all right? Sometimes that can lead to the idea of chaos, but it also is the idea of no government control because the people know better, all right, essentially. That association is going to not go over really well with the public, all right? People do not like the anarchists at this time, all right? People usually don't like anarchists anytime, all right, to be perfectly honest. And because of that association, the Knights of Labor will fade away, all right, because nobody wants to be associated with a group that is a group of anarchists. That would stop you maybe from getting hired in a job or something like that. So the Knights of Labor will disappear, okay? All right, now, for our next labor union, right? The American Federation of Labor, right? This one is still around today, so they don't have any like issues as a problem because they're still around today, right? Their leader is Samuel Gompers, right? This is actually their new seal that they have, right? So the American Federation of Labor and Congress of Industrial Organizations, right? So this is the current union that is established here, AFL-CIO, right? So their goals, very similar. They want better pay, right? Better hours, better conditions, right? How are they going to do this? Collective bargaining. So this is definitely a term we definitely want to write down, right? Collective bargaining. So think of collective is a group. Bargaining is negotiation. So it's like group negotiation. So we're all going to sit at the table together and we are going to figure out a solution to our problems. All right. Who are going to be members of this group? Skilled white males. So very selective of who is going to be a member of this organization. All right. However, since you have a very selective group, you're going to be able to control that group and their goals much more effectively than if you have a group that's very large. Right. So very limited group, but so successful that they still exist today. Some of these other groups like the Knights of Labor, we can't say that about them. Okay, and then we get to our third group here, and we're only going to have three, is the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, right? They are still around today as well. Here's their new seal that they have. Their nickname is also called the Wobblies, okay? They had great nicknames back then, right? Their leaders are Big Bill Hayworth, right? So he's going to be the guy who founds the group. However, the more famous person that will be associated with this is Eugene V. Debs, right? Mr. Debs here is going to be associated with lots of different things dealing with labor unions, right, and socialist activity, right? He even runs for president. He runs for president 4 different times. One of those times here is his campaign button when he was running for president from jail. Yes, you were allowed to do that. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you can't. All right. He didn't win, obviously. Okay. But you can run from jail if you really want to. Right. So for this group here, the biggest difference for the IWW, or the Industrial Workers of the World, right, is that everyone is allowed to be part of this group, right, because they are a socialist organization, right, goals that are socialistly leaning, right? Okay, so some of those goals: overthrow the wage system and replace it with industrial democracy. So it's the idea of getting, like, kind of reestablishing the issues of capitalism. So real quick, we're going to look at this picture here, and then we're going to come back. Right, so this picture here is from this idea of the Industrial Workers of the World, right, and it's the pyramid of the capitalist system, right, and there here at the bottom is the workers, and the workers are holding up the rest of the pyramid. And so their idea is that if they topple capitalism, right, then the workers will have more freedom and more rights, because that's what is holding up the system. And if the workers unite together, they can bring the system down. Okay, so that's kind of a simplistic way, but to explain this, but also we got kind of a nice visual to kind of show what they're talking about with this idea of uniting together, because they're the base of the pyramid. Right, so back over here to this group. So tactics: they're going to have strikes, they're going to have boycotts. All right, we all know what a boycott is, right? Refusal to buy a good. Slowdowns. So slow down would be that you're working in a factory, but you're working at not as fast as you could be, all right? So costing the factory and the owners money. Sabotage, obviously that's probably not a great thing to be doing, but if you break the machine that's in the factory, you cause a stoppage of work, which is going to be causing the strike and the slowdown, right? They're not going to use collective bargaining because they think that that's going to be forced into contracts, and that kind of goes against their socialist philosophies. Right? Really unique. We already said before, everyone is allowed. And when I say everyone is allowed in this union. So you can have unskilled, skilled, immigrants, minorities, and women. Minorities and women have not been mentioned in these other groups. So this is what's going to make this group very unique. Right? They're still around today, but they do lose some support with World War I, right? Because they speak out against the war, right? And when they speak out against the war, the reason is because they feel that the war is all these empires that are fighting against each other, which it is, right? And it's basically who's going to take over and get the most money, right? And making money off of war materials, which is super capitalistic, okay? So all those things are true, right? But at the time, it was very unpopular to speak out against the war, and that was seen as unpatriotic. So they do kind of get, have this bad connotation because of doing that, right? So those are our 3 labor unions we have here, right? And we're going to have 4 different strikes, okay? So our first strike, and again, for all these strikes, we're going to have, like, where is it, what groups are involved, why are they doing it, a description of what's going on, and how is it resolved, right? And again, I'm trying to make these notes here go a little bit faster and a bit more organized, since, we have a lot of people that are not going to be in class for the PSAT and things like that. All right, so for the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. So remember, 1877, let's review real quick. That was the Compromise of 1877 that ends the Reconstruction era. And that's the whole idea, that you have Reconstruction ending in the South, and in the North, they're having these strikes. So that kind of gives a little extra level, or an extra layer, if you will, of what's going on during the time period. So where is this taking place? It is in West Virginia. Okay, so we're in the north, all right, but not, kind of in the middle sort of the country, all right? Who's leading it? Obviously with railroads, it is going to be workers working on the railroad, but they're unorganized workers, so there's not a union officially part of this, but all the workers during working with the railroads are going to try to gather together in an unofficial way. They're kind of creating a union. Okay, why are they striking? The railroads cut their wages in 1873, and then 1877 they cut another 10% of their wages. So they're losing money, right? And again, this is because the economy in the United States was doing bad. 1873 was the Panic of 1873. So that makes sense why it's happening, but the people still have to pay their rent. They still have to pay for food and things like that, right? And they need better, right? Description of our strike: they're going to walk out on the job, so basically just stop what you're doing and leave. All right, so that's kind of like a strike. All right, they're going to block the tracks, so no goods can come back and forth. Right, and since it's unorganized, it kind of turns into a mob scene. Right, so this does not turn out very well for what's going on. Other people are going to walk out at other railroads in different parts of the country when they hear about this, as kind of a way to support it. So this kind of shuts down a lot of railroad traffic all around the country. Right, you can kind of see in this picture here, you got people over this way. These are the railroad workers. Right, and then obviously the people on horseback are not the railroad workers. These are going to be militia, right, that are going to be called in to stop the strike. So how is it resolved? 100 people are dead, right? So when we're talking about the labor union time period, it's not just people wanting to get better wages and better hours, but they're literally fighting for their lives against the capitalistic system and the robber barons of the Gilded Age. So a lot on, like at stake here for those people. Tons of property damage. Again, these militiamen are called in to end the strike. The workers do not win, right? So the workers are stopped here, and definitely a win for the business, right? Okay, and it's going to discourage other people from striking because they saw what happened to the people that did this, right? So not one of the best days for labor unions, right? Okay, and then we have the Haymarket riot, right? And it's called a riot because of what all transpired. You can kind of see in some of the pictures sort of what's going on, right? So this is going to be in Chicago. Chicago is going to be a major location of where we're going to see a lot of labor activity happening, right? And we mentioned the Haymarket riot before because the Knights of Labor are going to be involved, right? And why are they striking? They want one thing: an 8-hour workday. That's all they wanted, right? So when this is all going on, basically, to kind of tell you guys the story, right? It's one of those things where I wish we could go on a field trip to Chicago and I could show you exactly where all this stuff was going on, and we could have tell the story as it's happening. But alas, we can't do that. All right, so anyhow, if we look at this picture here, all right, you can see that the people are out on the streets, and we have some people that are talking. So basically, think of it as we have people that are standing on top of like a wagon, and they are trying to tell everyone, this is why we should have a say. We want an 8-hour workday. We want this. We want that, right? And they got all these people to gather by giving out these different flyers here. And when you look at these flyers, this one on the left, all right, you can obviously read that, all right, it's a mass meeting, attention workmen. And then over here, all right, okay, is that you have all these same similar things, but at the bottom, all right, that's in German. Right, so this is actually going out to all of these people that are working in the community, right? So they're talking and everything to the masses, but in the midst of all of this and this protest that's happening peacefully, there are bombs that are going to be thrown by anarchists in the crowd. So this is started by the Knights of Labor. However, the anarchists in the crowd kind of take over, right? And then those bombs that they have made are going to be thrown at police. right, when police come to try to stop everything, right? And there'll be several people who die in the midst of all of this chaos that ends up happening, right? And again, the Knights of Labor will kind of fade away after this event because of the idea of being associated with anarchists and this chaos that's going on. This image up here at the top left, right, is, so it says the anarchists of Chicago, right, and it has actually labeled, these are the people who died at the time. The place in Chicago is still marked as a place of remembrance for labor unions, right? And so here we have a picture. They have this nice statue here in one of the graveyards nearby. This is where the people who died in the Haymarket riot are rested, right? And here you can see people every year go there to talk about what happened at that particular time. In the actual streets of downtown Chicago, right, there is this very interesting, I guess, very modern looking statue. Let's make it a little bigger so you guys can see it. All right, so this statue is in the exact location where the riot took place. So I know it's obviously it's abstract, but to kind of show you what's going on, that you can see that there's a wagon that's here, right? And that is where the people stood on top of that wagon to tell the crowd of what was going on. So this is the exact spot of where it happened. So if we go back to our pictures, right, this one down here is that's where the people are standing on top of the wagon, right? And that is what this new piece of art is supposed to be commemorating. Okay. Again, it's one of those things is that if we could go and everything like that, it would be really cool to go see all this stuff. I got to go with a bunch of teachers. It was really cool. And you know, labor history is one of those things I just find very fascinating. Right. Okay. So now we got two more strikes here. We have the Homestead strike, right? Homestead is going to be in Pennsylvania, all right? It's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? So something to help us remember, right, is what's going on here is that Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, think of the NFL, right? You have the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? That means the steel industry. And then who's associated with the steel industry? Carnegie, right? So Carnegie's plant is the Homestead plant, right? So this is involved with Andrew Carnegie. So who is fighting with all of this? They are the steel workers at this plant. They're actually called the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers, right? Amalgamated, this is an SAT word for you that are taking the PSAT, right? Amalgamated means that you are united, okay? All right, so amalgamated is united. So we're learning a new $5 word today, all right? What do they want, right? Their union contract is up for renewal, all right? So they do have a union there, all right? And they want to continue to have that union. So they have to renegotiate this contract. Andrew Carnegie, he has left the Pittsburgh area. He is not there, and he leaves this guy named Fisk in charge, right? And Fisk does not like the union, and he tries to end the union by hiring people that are non-union workers, making people promise that they're not going to be part of the union and things like that. And it just starts to get really out of hand. So other things that Fisk is going to do, right, to lock out the unionists, right, he's going to put a 12-foot fence around the entire plant. You can't get in if you're part of the union. Yeah, that's not going to go over very well. He also brings in 300 Pinkerton detectives. So the Pinkertons, right, is the name of a for-hire detective agency. Think of them almost like kind of like a professional militia or like hired guns type of thing. And he hires these people to basically be bodyguards and protect the Homestead plant from these union people from getting in, all right? And in the process of having these Pinkertons, so in this picture here, these are the Pinkerton soldiers right here, okay? All right, they call them detectives because it sounds a little bit better than soldiers, but they got big guns. They're soldiers. All right. So these guys are out in front. You can see the big fence behind them. All right. And when the union guys are trying to get in, all right, and you have these soldiers that are stopping them, all right, somebody fires and we don't know who it was. All right. And chaos ensues. Right. You can kind of see a trend here of this conflict and then chaos ensues. So how does it end? Right. The Pinkertons surrender. right? Okay, so they stop because the union actually was doing really well, all right? Okay, we start having negotiations between the union and the plant, so with Carnegie's people, all right? However, fighting continues to happen, all right? So all those negotiations are going to be for naught, all right? And eventually the union will collapse. All right, the big thing to write down for this one is that last thing. Carnegie and U.S. Steel remain non-union for 40 years after this event. So this is really going to hurt the idea of having unions in the United States because of the is that you are going to be stopped, right? And they're going to bring in military to stop you. So definitely a win for Carnegie. Definitely a reason that Carnegie is a robber baron. So if for your Janus figure, if you picked Carnegie, this definitely would be a topic to add in to the robber baron side. Right. And our last strike is the Pullman strike. Of all the strikes, this one is the big one, all right, because it's even involving the president at the time, all right? So where is it taking place? Pullman, Illinois, outside of Chicago. So you're seeing a trend. There's lots of stuff happening in and out of Chicago at this time. Right? So who is it led by? We got the American Railway Union, and Eugene Debs is going to be involved. Now, Eugene Debs is part of the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World. They're not part of this strike. However, he is going to step in to try to help out the American Railway Union. Okay? Why are they striking? This is the classic reason why to strike, right? It's, the total abuse by the system, right? So the wages were cut by the company, right? So by 25 to 40%, which is outrageous. However, the workers, they were this group of people, they had to live in a company town. We talked about company towns with Lowell Mill back with the antebellum time period, all right? And they had all the women that had to live in the town next to the factory. Well, this is that same idea. You got to live in the town next to your factory. Well, they never lowered the rent. So the rent stayed high and the wages go low. So our political cartoon here at the top left, right, it says Pullman here on the guy that is kind of making this vice get tighter, and it's low wages and high rent, and the worker is here in the middle. So you're basically stuck and you're a slave to the company because you can't pay your rent and you're in debt to them, but they won't pay you any more money, right? So this is not good, all right? So what do? They go on strike, okay? Classic move, all right? So we got George Pullman refuses Debs' pleas for negotiations. So again, Debs comes in to help negotiate, right, on behalf of the railway union, all right? So he comes in to help do that. Right? The workers stopped handling Pullman railroad cars. They stopped most railroad traffic in the Midwest. So basically, with railroad traffic in and out of the Midwest of the United States, so basically Chicago, your second largest city in the country, right, is stopped. Total standstill, right? Definitely highlight that bit, right? And they also said in here, right, we're stopping mail and commerce. So commerce is trade and mail. Now, the reason we want to point out the mail is because of who's in charge of the mail. That is the United States government is in charge of the mail. So, and that's how we're transporting most, your bills and like checks and things like that and information. So by stopping the mail, you're not just stopping people from getting letters, right? You're really, really stopping an entire industry. So that is going to be a big ticket part of this story, right? So far everything's been kind of normal, all right? They're striking, so far they're stopping this railroad traffic. That's a good thing. They're going to get somebody to pay attention, right? How it is resolved, the president gets involved, right? So president at this time is President Grover Cleveland, this guy right here, all right? We'll talk more about Grover Cleveland on Friday. Okay, where we'll kind of bring this up and be like, oh yeah, that's the thing that happened when Grover Cleveland was president, right? So he orders federal troops to go to Chicago and stop this strike, right? Well, how is he able to have the authority to do that? Because they're interfering with the mail, right? And that is going to kind of invoke federal involvement, right? Because it's dealing with something that the U.S. government is in charge of, right? The Attorney General of the United States places an injunction, right? That's an injunction is basically a legal document to stop you from doing something. Forbidding interference on the mail and interstate trade, right? And he says the reason he can have this injunction of these people striking to stop is because he says they violate the Sherman Antitrust Act. Well, let's back up. The Sherman Antitrust Act said that monopolies are illegal. Well, this is a union. They're not a monopoly, right? So what this Attorney General did is he twists the meaning of the Sherman Antitrust Act to say that if the Sherman Antitrust Act was to make unions illegal, or to make monopolies illegal, we're going to make it to also say unions are illegal. And the way they're going to do that is that the definition of a monopoly is control of an industry. Well, by this group striking, they are controlling the mail and they're controlling the railroads. Therefore, they can say, quote unquote, they're acting like a monopoly. Now, this is not what the people in Congress wrote the Sherman Antitrust Act to mean, right? But this lawyer here, who is the Attorney General of the United States, is going to twist this law to make it where this union can no longer strike because they are quote unquote controlling a segment of of an industry. Okay, so they're twisting it to fit their ways. All right, so the union obviously has to concede. They call off the strike. All right, Debs is still part of this whole thing where he's negotiating, trying to help out. He violates this injunction because he says that, hey, I still want to help out. I still want this strike to happen, right? Trying to fight for the workers. And so he is still going to be interfering. He is arrested and thrown into jail for violating this injunction. And then we have a Supreme Court case that's called In Re Debs. So this is in your guys' terms list. In Re Debs is the name, right? And it's the Supreme Court basically upholding the ruling that yes, this injunction was allowed. This injunction is fair. Right? So we've had a lot of stuff happening here, all right, with our labor unions. All right, I want to bring you back to that first slide here just to kind of get a feel for, like, I love this image right here. It's just kind of a cool image. The idea that those workers, when they're by themselves, can't do a whole lot, but when we are all united, all right, you can do quite a bit. And so this time period of the Gilded Age, these people are trying to fight against this ultra capitalism, right, of these robber barons, captains of industry guys, right, during this Gilded Age. And so they're trying to fight back, but they're not very successful. Unfortunately, that is going to last for a bit of time. It's going to take us to get to the Great Depression to actually start thinking that having labor unions and having laws to protect our workers is actually a good idea, right? But it's going to take us quite a while to get there. So these people at the time didn't get to really see the fruits of their labor, all right? However, they do give us that those goals of like what we could have in the future. So from our labor union, we have Labor Days, all right? Okay, we have Labor Day as a holiday, all right? And that's to remember the people of what they had done to make sure that we had stuff like a weekend, stuff like an 8-hour workday. If you're working hourly, if you have more than 40 hours in a week, you get paid overtime. If you are working, you get things like you get retirement from where you work, you get health insurance from where you work. You get these different things to protect your workers. You get sick days. So if you're sick, you can stay home and get better versus having to go to work and be sick and potentially get hurt. Or if you are hurt on the job, we have things for like workman's comp and things like that for the idea that we want to protect our workers. All of these things that we have all the time, like just like a weekend, are things we get from the labor union movement, right? So definitely an important thing in American history for us always to remember here, right? And that is the end of our notes for today, all right? If you got any questions, do send them to me on Remind. If I don't get to your Remind questions right away, don't fret. I will get to them eventually, all right? And I'll see you guys later.